No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we're going to be doing part 3 of our 5-part series on our Leader of Leaders episodes for the month of June. This is the 3rd episode. If you have not listened to the first 2, we've been talking about the acronym S.P.A.C.E. in terms of if you are a leader of leaders, how does that role differ from being a leader of individual contributors? 2 weeks ago, we talked about setting clear expectations. Last week, we talked about personalizing the support. Now, the A in the word space, we're going to be talking today about accepting your role. And, you know, this is a tough one for me because I think it encompasses part of the first 2 spaces, but it's different in that, you know, if you are promoted from being already in a leadership position, so you lead individual contributors, and now you're leading leaders, it's already been determined by your organization that you can lead, right? Because you're leading individual people, you are in that role already. Hopefully, a promotion to being a leader of leaders means you've done the role of a leader leading individual contributors well. And so there can be a significant amount of ego that goes along with a promotion like this. And I don't mean it from don't think of ego as a negative thing. Just think of it like a factual thing. Like it is going to be a positive thing for a person's ego to be able to get promoted like that. And I think that might be the single thing that makes it hard for a leader of leaders to accept their role. What do you think about this?
I think it's the hardest thing for all of us to do. Accepting your role. It's one thing to know that you have the role, the responsibility. And again, when you're leading leaders, a lot of the temptation is to step in and do some of the role, or, you know, want to be involved even. Like, I think of the times that we talk about empowering people and providing people with development opportunities, and then missing that part of it, missing that debate, missing the dialogue, missing the ideation element of it. And I think that as leaders of leaders, that really is, I think it's the toughest part for me anyway, of like knowing that there's great work that's being done, and kind of like removing yourself to make sure that you're not either changing, the direction of where the work is going, or creating spaces where people feel because you're in an elevated position that your opinion should be taken, more importantly, or whatever the case is. And I think that accepting your role means exactly that, like just being okay with realizing that there are going to be times when you will be in that space, especially if you create it and you build a great culture with your leaders where they know that their opinions, their thoughts, and their perspectives are just as important, if not more important, especially when you're talking about tactical strategy elements, than yours are. But that takes a while to get there. And sometimes, even when you have it, there are times when you're doing work that that you maybe you enjoy doing or that you have to do, but either way, that you're missing out on some really, really good stuff. And and I think that's just it's a tough thing. And to your point, like the ego part of it plays a big role. You do need ego. You need confidence to build confidence, I believe. But also you need to be able to know when is it too much, when is it overbearing, and or how do you allow people to have those very open debates? How do you allow your team, your leaders to have transparent dialogue and say things to each other, to work through work that they may not want to say in front of everybody's boss? Like those are things where I think accepting your role means also saying what you need to say, being involved when you need to be involved in, and then stepping outside of the room, theoretically and actually, to allow there to be the time for your leaders to go out and do the great work together and to build that bond.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And step outside of the room so that they can have time to be with each other, even if they're not executing. If they are building strategy or talking about how best to execute the strategy that has been handed down to them, a lot of times the work changes or the discussion about the work changes if you, as their boss, are in the room. And oftentimes being able to step outside the room, it can feel very it can feel like you're removing yourself and that you are all of a sudden you don't have your thumb on the pulse of what's going on. That's intentional. You should do that, because if you are less connected to the actual execution of the work and more connected to the execution of the leadership strategy that will enable that work to happen, I think you're more likely to be able to focus on the elements of your job that you should be focusing on, which is developing leaders as opposed to executing the strategy, developing the strategy instead of executing the strategy. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this is where I've been tripped up in the past, especially the first time that I was leading a team of leaders, and this was a struggle for me, is that when I was leading a team of individual contributors, I could quantify my contribution by saying, look, here's the 10 people who reported to me. These are the 3 that are amazing. They're superstars. They know exactly what they're doing. And then these are the 5 that are kind of in the middle. They're getting better. You can see some improvement. Then these 3 people down here on the bottom, they're not doing as well as they should. But I've had this conversation and that conversation. We've gone through these exercises to help them get better. And look at their month-over-month performance. Look at how has it improved from this month to this month to this month. Look at this is what I have done as a leader. If you are a leader of leaders, it's much harder to quantify that what you did was responsible for that execution or that performance increase of an individual employee, unless you're actually involved in the increase of improvement for that individual employee. And if you're doing that, I would argue that you're not accepting your role as a leader of leaders, that you're getting in and doing the work that you should be expecting your direct reports to do, because they are now the leaders of those individual contributors. And so when I've had struggle with this, it's when I feel like I'm just being able to say, I had conversations with my direct reports. I've offered my support. I've personalized that support. I feel like I've set clear expectations. It's very hard to say, hey, look on this Excel spreadsheet. This is what I did. This is my contribution. It's more likely that you can't quantify that on a day-by-day or week-by-week basis. You have to quantify it over time with the quarterly or annual results or with the number of people you got promoted. And in order to do that and feel confident that you have the space to do that, you have to be working for a boss yourself or for an organization yourself who puts value on that and says, yes, we trust that this is your role and you should accept that part of your role and stop trying to actually execute what you used to execute as an individual contributor or as a leader of individual contributors. And so that's where I think a lot of people get in the weeds, myself included on that. And I've had to kind of almost be told, no, it's okay. You can stop doing that part of the role. We got this now. And it's hard to let go of that, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's absolutely so true, especially because if you have a really great passion for leadership and leading people, and as a leader who is responsible for people's development, so many great gems come out of those conversations, so many light bulb moments, so many times where the dots connect, or somebody goes, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way. That makes a whole lot of sense. Like, why don't we adjust it to this? Like, all those things that you kind of get to be a part of, seeing and feeling in the moment. It's not that you don't get those anymore. It's just that your audience becomes smaller. And then when you're accepting your role, you're realizing that you are working with leaders who are responsible for leading people. And I think, what you said earlier, like elevating that space to say, like, am I spending my time in the development of the collective leadership team? Am I spending my time, allowing them to go and do the job that they're supposed to be doing, so that I can go out and do the job that I'm supposed to be doing? And many times that is in a space around advocacy, around like the larger team here needs these types of resources, needs this type of clarity. There's even if it's a developmental opportunity, like my leadership team, I believe, needs to grasp this leadership concept a little bit better, or understand a little bit of a higher level of the work or the responsibility of leadership. Like that's the accepting of the role and then moving the team collectively together, along with connecting with each individual person. But when we're thinking about creating space and being a leader of leaders, when you start to pull out of the conversations and the dialogue specific to the tactics and the day-to-day strategies and things like that, and then you start to engage with the leadership team in more theory conversations, and then validating of alignment and making sure that there's proof that these conversations are happening in these other meetings. I think that adds the most amount of value. It allows you to see what leaders need your time, what leaders may need more engagement, where you may have to sit in on some of those meetings where both you'll enjoy it, but you'll also be able to validate, understand, and provide that leader with more specific direction. And then which leaders don't need that whatsoever, and that they're doing great work. They know what's going on. They're capable of explaining it quickly. They know how to utilize you in the role that you have. They know when to ask for things when they need them, like all that type of stuff. If you're not in those spaces to see and observe that, then you're going to miss those things. And those are the things that I think have you spending your time in the wrong spaces, which then for a leader who doesn't need it feels like you might be micromanaging and not giving them the chance to do the job.
Yeah, that's so true. Some of the best leaders that I've had have been ones who they never did the role that I was doing, which means they didn't know exactly how to do it. They just knew enough to make sure that I was doing it, to be able to accomplish it and get it done. And that worked out really well because they never tried to do my job because they didn't know how to do my job.
Right,
they just knew just enough about it to be able to validate that I was doing it in the correct way, or that the results were there. And sometimes that can be really great if you have a leader who is removed enough to be able to do that. In a lot of cases, if you are a leader of leaders, you were promoted out of the role that you are now leading that team of people doing. So the likelihood of you not knowing how to do that role is a little bit slimmer unless you came from a completely different organization or a different industry, and that can make it more difficult. I will say that it can swing the other way too. Meaning, if you believe that if you wholeheartedly buy into say, nope, this is the job of my people now. I'm a leader of leaders. I'm going to take a back seat and really allow them to kind of do what they're doing. You could end up having problems get away from you that you don't know about until they're too late. And so it is a dance to make sure that you are close enough to be able to anticipate and see issues without being so close that your people feel like you're breathing down their neck and trying to do their job for them. And again, this is, going back to last week, this is the personalizing the support and making sure you're talking to people about where they want you to be there and where they don't want you to be there. Because again, it's something you said a long time, you have to allow your people the space to fail, but never let them, and that's where that comes in. The other thing I want to say too, and this is where I think this is the crux of what can derail leaders of leaders, especially when you're talking about non-remote environments, retail spaces and service industry spaces. And this is this kind of threading the needle of when it is appropriate to actually jump in and do the work. And so, I think about a good example I like to use is, you have firefighters and there's a building that's on fire and there's a battalion chief or whoever it is that's standing on the sidelines. And what they're doing is they have the radio on and they're directing the resources and they are trying to make sure that everybody's in the right space to get the right work done so that as little property and as little life is lost as possible. And for that battalion chief to just grab a hose and jump in probably isn't a good idea, because what they're doing serving as kind of like the hub of communication, moving people around, finding out where resources need to be. That is an essential part of making sure that fire gets down as quickly as possible. But if there are certain situations where it is absolutely critical that every single person picks up a hose and starts fighting that fire. And so if you're a leader of leaders, at what point do you jump in and actually start doing the work alongside your people? I've seen leaders in a retail space, jump in and start, jump on a cash register and start ringing out customers in a retail environment. And depending on the situation, I've interpreted that in two different ways. I've interpreted that as, wow, there's a person who doesn't want to see their people go underwater because they know that everybody has to jump in and play sometimes. I've also interpreted that sometimes as being, why is that person doing that? They are now the most overpaid cashier in the building. They shouldn't be doing that. There's other things this person should be doing besides jumping on a cash register and ringing out customers. And the impression I got was that they were trying to say, look at me, I can get in there and do things too. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is you as a leader have to really be super self-aware on why you're making the decision to jump in or not. If the decision to jump in is that you truly believe that there's nothing more you can contribute from a leadership standpoint, and you just have to get in and get something done, that I think that's a very righteous reason to get involved. If you're jumping in because you want to be able to say, I'm going to show these people that I still got this, right? Whatever that is a very wrong reason to just jump in and get the work done too. And it will be interpreted as such. Your people will see right through that. So I think that's something that only each leader in each individual circumstance can make that decision on their own. But it's imperative that those decisions are made correctly in order to make sure your people are interpreting your support as being, coming from the right place.
Absolutely agree. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
The 1 Minute Hack.
All right, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about the last 5 times that you stepped out of your role as a leader and into your role as a doer, that you actually got the work done yourself. Write those times down, and I want you to think about why you jumped in and did it. And I want you to write down what you think about the reasoning was for that. Was it because you wanted to show people that you could still do it? Or was it because you truly believed that that was your best opportunity to serve your people, was to get in there and do the work with them? And then what I want you to do is, if you can admit that some of those were because you wanted to show your people that you could still do it too, then ignore those. Focus on the ones where you believe that it was the right thing to do. I want you to pull people that were in that situation with you in the moment and bring it up to them and ask them if they interpreted it the same way. I want you to get from them the idea that you can validate that, yes, they interpreted it as that, oh, thank goodness Chris jumped in, Lorenzo jumped in to help with this problem because we were slammed, we were underwater, and we needed that help. Or if they interpreted it as, we were good, we got this. Great, it's good that you jumped in, but fine, we could have done this too. And make sure that your level of self-awareness and your kind of like impression about what your level of support is mirrored by what your people think your level of support is. Because if you continue to do this process over time, you'll become much better at deciding when the right time to jump in is and when the right time is accepting your role as the leader of leaders and giving your people their space.
Yeah, it's a great 1 minute hack, and I think that it's a good practice and reflection and consideration of others, because again, I think it's there are definitely times when, as the leader of leaders, you will have to step into situations and either correct them or help or support in the moment, because everything in your body and senses will tell you this needs to get addressed right now. And as long as that's driven by your intent to help the team and be another participant in whatever is happening to create a solution, then fantastic. And as long as it's not driven by, let me do something that I enjoy doing because I don't want to do this other thing, or let me show people how to do something, or let me, whatever that other thing might be, it's important to think about what that is and then how people are impacted by you stepping into those spaces from time to time.
Right. And then, something I don't want to forget here too is that there could be the reason why you're jumping in. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you think it's the appropriate thing, or that you're trying to show your people, take them to school and show them you still got it. It could be that it's just easy. Maybe you've done it for a long time and you know how to do it, and you're mentally and emotionally taxed by the job of being a leader for that day, and you just want to do something that's a little bit more mindless. It doesn't matter. It will be interpreted as the ego reason, not as the support reason by your people, even if your intentions were not malicious, even if it was just, you just wanted to break from something, but you still wanted to be able to get work done. And so that's why it's important to have these conversations, because there are other ways of doing that if that's what you need to do. There are other ways of stepping in if you need to step in without letting your people interpret it as that all you're trying to do is grow your own ego.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.